Words can make you fall in love, start a war, or bring a grown man to tears. And one ancient Greek understood this power so deeply that he called speech a form of sorcery, a drug poured into the human soul. He grew so rich and so famous casting his spells with language that he lived to be almost 110 years old. And along the way, he tried to prove something truly shocking, that nothing in the world really exists at all.
Words are the most powerful force human beings have ever wielded, and one man saw this more clearly than anyone. Long before advertising, before propaganda, before the endless rivers of speech that flood our modern world, a Greek thinker named Gorgias understood that language could bend the human mind like nothing else. He believed that a skilled speaker could make you feel joy or terror, courage or despair, simply by arranging sounds in the air. To him, this was not an exaggeration, but a literal truth, for he saw in speech a power close to magic, and he spent his very long life learning to command that power like a master wizard commands a spell. To hear him speak, people said, was to feel your own mind quietly bending to his will. No one had ever made language feel so much like a living force. He was born around the year 483 before the Common Era, in a Greek colony on the island of Sicily. His home city was Leontinoi, a place far from the great centers of Greek power, but rich in its own culture and ambition. Sicily in those days was a land of wealthy cities, fierce rivalries, and a growing fascination with the art of persuasive speech. It was the perfect soil for a mind like his to take root and flourish. From this island on the edge of the Greek world, Gorgias would rise to dazzle the greatest city of them all. Even as a young man, he seemed to sense that his true weapon would be his tongue. The island had given the world a mind that would one day conquer Athens with mere words. One moment that changed his life, and arguably changed the course of philosophy, came in the year 427. His city of Leontinoi was under threat from a powerful neighbor, and it desperately needed help from mighty Athens. So the people chose Gorgias to travel across the sea as their ambassador, to persuade the Athenians to come to their aid. It was a mission that depended entirely on the power of his words. And when this silver-tongued visitor from Sicily opened his mouth before the Athenian assembly, something remarkable happened. Everything his city hoped for now rested on a single man and the sounds he could make, and Gorgias was about to show the world exactly what a voice could do. History would turn on whether one man's words could sway a hostile crowd. Utterly spellbound were the Athenians by the way Gorgias spoke, for they had never heard anything quite like it. His style was dazzling and strange, full of balanced phrases, poetic rhythms, surprising rhymes, and clever contrasts that fell upon the ear like music. He spoke prose as though it were poetry, weaving sound and sense together into something hypnotic and new. The sophisticated citizens of Athens, who prided themselves on their love of clever speech, were swept off their feet. In that single performance, Gorgias became an overnight sensation in the intellectual capital of the world. Grown men who had heard 1,000 speeches sat as still as children under his spell. It was as if he had discovered a new kind of music made entirely of meaning.
His success in Athens made him wealthy and famous beyond his wildest dreams. Gorgias realized that his gift for language was worth a fortune, and he began to teach his art to others for enormous fees. Young men from rich families flocked to him, eager to learn the secrets of persuasion that could win them power, wealth, and glory in public life. He traveled from city to city across the Greek world, giving spectacular public performances and charging astonishing sums for his lessons. He became one of the richest and most celebrated teachers of his age, a superstar of the spoken word. Overnight, the ambassador from a small Sicilian city had become the toast of the ancient world. His voice had turned into pure gold. Gorgias belonged to that famous and controversial group of thinkers known as the Sophists. These were the traveling teachers of ancient Greece who sold wisdom and skill for money, promising to make their students successful in the fierce competition of public life. But Gorgias stood apart even among the Sophists, for he made a bold and surprising claim about himself. He refused to call himself a teacher of virtue, as some others did, insisting instead that he taught only one thing, the art of rhetoric. He was, above all, a master of persuasion, and he made no apology for it. He promised not to make his students good, but to make them powerful. And in a world ruled by public speech, that was a promise worth a fortune. At the heart of everything Gorgias believed lay a profound fascination with the sheer power of speech. He was convinced that language was not a mere tool for describing the world, but an active force that could reshape reality itself in the human mind. Words, he taught, could accomplish the most divine of deeds, calming fear, banishing grief, stirring joy, and awakening pity. He compared the effect of speech upon the soul to the effect of drugs upon the body, for just as different medicines cure different ailments, so different words produce different feelings. This was a startlingly modern insight into the psychology of persuasion. To him, a sentence could be a weapon, a caress, a poison, or a cure. He treated the human soul as an instrument that the right words could play at will. To show off the dazzling power of his art, Gorgias wrote a famous speech that still amazes readers today. He chose to defend the most hated woman in all Greek legend, Helen of Troy, whose flight with Paris had launched the terrible Trojan War. For centuries she had been blamed as a traitor and a harlot, whose betrayal doomed thousands to death. Gorgias set himself the impossible task of proving her innocent, of washing away the blame that history had heaped upon her. It was a breathtaking display of intellectual daring, a challenge designed to prove that a clever speaker could defend anything at all. It was as if a lawyer today volunteered to defend history's most notorious villain just to prove it could be done. And Gorgias intended to win.
In this remarkable speech, known as the encomium of Helen, Gorgias built his defense with cunning logic. He argued that Helen could only have left her husband for one of 4 reasons, and that none of them were truly her fault. Perhaps the gods compelled her, and who can resist the will of a god? Perhaps she was taken by force, in which case she was a victim deserving pity, not blame. Perhaps she fell in love, and love is a powerful force that overwhelms the will. Each possibility, he argued with dazzling skill, removed the guilt from Helen entirely. Watch how he traps his listeners, closing every exit until only innocence remains. It is a masterclass in the quiet architecture of persuasion. Notice how each innocent explanation quietly tightens around the listener's mind. But it was his 4th argument that revealed the true heart of his philosophy. Perhaps, Gorgias suggested, Helen was persuaded by speech, seduced not by a person, but by the sheer power of words themselves. And if she was conquered by language, he argued, then she cannot be blamed, for speech is a mighty force that overpowers the mind. Words, he wrote, have the power of a drug, bewitching and persuading and changing the soul by their sorcery. In defending Helen through the power of speech, Gorgias was really singing a hymn to the magical power of language itself. With that single argument, a defense of Helen became a confession of his deepest belief. Language, to Gorgias, was the true seducer in every story. No sword could have defended Helen so completely as his glittering chain of words. Consider how profound and unsettling this idea truly is when you think it through. If words can overpower the mind as completely as physical force overpowers the body, then how free are any of us really? Every time we are persuaded, moved, or convinced by a skilled speaker, are we exercising our own judgment, or are we simply falling under a spell? Gorgias forces us to confront the frightening power that language holds over our thoughts and feelings. He understood 24 centuries ago something that modern advertisers and politicians know all too well. You feel this power yourself every time a song or a speech moves you against your will. Gorgias simply named the magic that the rest of us barely notice. Beyond his celebration of rhetoric, Gorgias produced a work of philosophy so radical it still stuns people today. In a treatise usually called On Nature or On What Is Not, he set out to prove three shocking claims in sequence. First, he argued that nothing exists at all. Second, that even if something did exist, we could never know it. And third, that even if we could know it, we could never communicate that knowledge to anyone else. It was philosophy pushed to the very edge of the abyss, a dizzying descent into total skepticism. It was the boldest thing a philosopher could possibly say, and he said it with a straight face. He was not describing the world so much as dismantling it. To deny existence itself was to dance on the very edge of thought.
Let us take these three astonishing claims one at a time, for each is stranger than the last. His first claim, that nothing exists, was a direct assault on the whole tradition of Greek philosophy. Other thinkers had argued endlessly about what truly exists, whether it was water or fire or unchanging being or countless atoms. Gorgias swept all of these debates aside with a single audacious stroke, arguing that being itself is impossible and contradictory. Where others had asked what reality is made of, he dared to ask whether there is any reality at all. With a single argument, he tried to pull the floor out from under all of philosophy. It was breathtaking, reckless, and unforgettable. Reality itself, he seemed to say, might be nothing more than a comfortable assumption. The second claim was, in some ways, even more disturbing than the first. Even supposing that something did exist, Gorgias argued, the human mind could never truly grasp or know it. He pointed out that we think many things that are not real, imagining chariots racing across the sea or men flying through the air. If our thoughts do not match reality, he reasoned, then thinking of something is no guarantee that it exists. And so the bridge between our minds and the world begins to crumble, leaving us stranded in uncertainty. He showed how easily the mind wanders into things that were never real at all. And if thought can betray us like that, what can we ever truly trust? The gap between the mind and the world had never looked so wide or so frightening. A third claim struck at the very thing Gorgias himself was most famous for, the power of speech. Even if something existed, and even if we could know it, he argued, we could never communicate that knowledge to another person. For the words we speak are not the things themselves, but only sounds, mere symbols that stand in for reality. When I tell you about a color or a taste, my words can never transfer my actual experience into your mind. Each of us remains locked inside our own private world, unable to truly share what we know. Here, the master of speech turned his genius against speech itself. It was as if a great painter set out to prove that no picture could ever show anything real. Language, in his hands, became both the magician and the cage. Scholars have argued for centuries about what Gorgias really meant by this strange and troubling work. Was he serious, or was the whole thing an elaborate joke, a brilliant parody of the philosophers he loved to mock? Some believe he was genuinely a radical skeptic who doubted the very possibility of knowledge and truth. Others think he was showing off, proving that his rhetorical skill was so great he could argue convincingly even for the most absurd conclusions. Perhaps, in a way that would have delighted him, the true answer is that we can never really know. That uncertainty may be exactly the effect he wanted to leave behind. A thinker who doubted everything would surely enjoy being impossible to pin down. We are left forever guessing at the smile behind his impossible arguments. Whatever his intentions, Gorgias had exposed some genuinely deep and troubling problems. His arguments raised profound questions about the relationship between language, thought, and reality that philosophers still wrestle with today. Can our words ever truly capture the world as it really is? Is there an unbridgeable gap between what we experience and what we can express? These questions lie at the very heart of modern philosophy of language, and Gorgias was probing them more than 2,000 years ago. His playful skepticism turned out to be surprisingly deep. Behind the dazzling wordplay lay questions that still keep philosophers awake at night. The showman, it turns out, was also a genuine seer. The playful trickster had stumbled onto some of philosophy's deepest wounds. There is a delicious irony at the center of the life of Gorgias that is impossible to miss. Here was a man who argued that knowledge cannot be communicated through words, yet who made his entire fortune and fame through the brilliant use of those very words. He proved, through the dazzling power of his speech, that speech could not transfer truth. This apparent contradiction was perhaps the ultimate demonstration of his point. Words, he seemed to be saying, do not carry truth from mind to mind, but they possess a power all their own, a power to move and persuade regardless of truth. He was living proof that words can conquer even when they cannot carry truth. His whole career was a paradox spoken aloud. No thinker ever refuted himself more gloriously or more deliberately. This separation of persuasion from truth is one of the most important and dangerous ideas he left behind. For Gorgias, the goal of rhetoric was not to convey what is true, but simply to persuade, to produce belief in the mind of the listener. A skilled speaker, in his view, could make an audience believe almost anything, whether it was true or false. This is a thrilling idea, but also a terrifying one, for it means that the power of words can be used to deceive as easily as to enlighten. It is the eternal double edge of rhetoric, capable of great good and great harm alike. To grasp this idea is to see why words can be as dangerous as any weapon. A sentence aimed well can do what no sword ever could. A whisper aimed with care can travel further than any army. It was precisely this idea that would bring Gorgias into conflict with one of history's greatest minds. The philosopher Plato, a student of Socrates, was deeply troubled by the teachings of the Sophists and their separation of persuasion from truth. Plato believed that the goal of thought should be the pursuit of genuine knowledge and real truth, not the mere manufacturing of belief. He saw in rhetoric a dangerous art that could make the worse argument appear the better and lead people away from wisdom. And so he set out to challenge everything that Gorgias represented. A great war of ideas was brewing, and words themselves were the battlefield. On one side stood truth, on the other, sheer persuasion. The fate of Western thought would turn on this quiet collision of ideas. Plato was so concerned with these questions that he wrote an entire dialogue named after Gorgias himself. In this famous work, Plato portrays a conversation in which Socrates cross-examines Gorgias and his followers about the true nature of rhetoric. Socrates argues that rhetoric, as the Sophists practice it, is not a real art at all, but a kind of flattery, a knack for pleasing crowds rather than serving truth. Through this dialogue, Plato tried to expose what he saw as the emptiness and danger at the heart of the Sophist project. The battle between philosophy and rhetoric had begun in earnest. Few thinkers have ever been honored with an entire dialogue bearing their own name. Even in attacking him, Plato admitted that Gorgias could not be ignored. That clash between Gorgias and Plato represents one of the great turning points in intellectual history. It was a battle between two visions of language and its purpose, two ways of understanding the power of words. On one side stood rhetoric, the art of persuasion, thrilling, powerful, and indifferent to truth. On the other stood philosophy, the patient search for genuine knowledge, suspicious of mere cleverness and eloquence. This ancient argument between persuasion and truth, between sounding right and being right, still rages in our world today, perhaps more fiercely than ever. We are still fighting that war today, scrolling through a world of clashing voices. The question of whether we want truth or merely persuasion has never gone away. Despite Plato's powerful criticisms, we should not dismiss Gorgias as a shallow trickster. His insights into the psychology of language were genuinely brilliant and remain valuable to this day. He understood with astonishing clarity how deeply words shape our emotions, our beliefs, and our very perception of reality. Long before the modern sciences of psychology and communication, he grasped that persuasion works upon the soul in ways that go far beyond cold logic. In studying the emotional power of speech, Gorgias was a pioneer whose discoveries still echo in every courtroom, campaign, and advertisement today. To dismiss him as a mere trickster is to miss the depth hidden beneath his dazzle. He saw into the human heart with uncomfortable clarity. Almost as legendary as his teachings was the sheer length of his life. Gorgias lived to be well over 100 years old, an almost unimaginable age in the ancient world. When asked the secret of his long and healthy life, he is said to have replied that he never did anything for the sake of pleasure alone. He remained sharp, active, and clear of mind right up until the very end of his extraordinary span of years. His long life allowed his influence to spread across generations, shaping the education of countless students throughout the Greek world. It is tempting to imagine that a lifetime spent studying persuasion somehow kept him young. Perhaps understanding the mind so well is its own strange medicine. His century of life let him watch whole generations rise beneath his teaching.
Pausing to appreciate the enormous influence Gorgias had on his world is well worth our time. He helped to establish rhetoric as a central subject of Greek education, a discipline that would remain at the heart of learning for 2,000 years. His dazzling style of speech influenced generations of orators, writers, and poets who came after him. The techniques he pioneered, the balanced phrases and rhythmic patterns, shaped the very sound of persuasive language for centuries. Through his students and admirers, the art of Gorgias flowed into the mainstream of Western culture and never left it. The very shape of how we are taught to speak still bears his ancient fingerprints. His voice, in a sense, never truly fell silent. Think about how relevant his ideas remain in our own noisy, word-saturated age. We live in a world drowning in persuasion, surrounded by advertisements, political speeches, and endless streams of information competing for our attention. Every day, we are the targets of people trying to shape our beliefs and desires through the careful use of language. Gorgias understood the power and the danger of all this more than 2 millennia before it reached its modern peak. His ancient insights feel less like history and more like a warning meant for us today. To read him now is to feel a chill of recognition, as if he were describing our own screens. He saw the flood of persuasion coming long before it arrived. Every scrolling feed today is an empire built on the power he first described. Something both thrilling and cautionary lives in the legacy that Gorgias left behind. On one hand, he revealed the extraordinary creative power of language, its ability to move hearts, to inspire, to console, and to unite. On the other, he exposed its terrible potential for manipulation and deception, its power to cloud the truth and lead us astray. To study Gorgias is to understand that words are among the most powerful tools we possess, and like all powerful tools, they can build or they can destroy. The choice, he reminds us, always lies with the one who wields them. The same tongue that can start a war can also end one, and Gorgias knew both. His art was a fire that could warm a home or burn it to the ground. Perhaps the deepest lesson of Gorgias is the importance of understanding how we are persuaded. If we do not understand the power that words hold over us, then we are helpless before those who would manipulate us. But if we learn to see the techniques of persuasion at work, we can begin to think more clearly and choose more freely. In this sense, studying the art of Gorgias is a kind of self-defense for the mind, a way of protecting ourselves from the spells that others might cast. Knowledge of rhetoric, it turns out, is knowledge of freedom. To understand how you are being moved is the first step toward moving freely. Gorgias, oddly enough, arms us against his own dark arts. To name a spell, he shows us, is to break part of its hold over you. When we look back across the centuries at this remarkable man, we see a figure of dazzling complexity. He was a showman and a philosopher, a skeptic and a magician of words, a man who could argue that nothing exists and then persuade an entire city to go to war. He embodied both the glory and the peril of human eloquence, the astonishing things that language can achieve for good or for ill.
In him we glimpse the birth of a discipline, the art of rhetoric, that would shape human civilization for millennia to come. Few thinkers have ever understood the human mind quite so well. He stands at the crossroads where beauty, power, and danger all meet in a single voice. To study him is to study the double nature of language itself. So the next time a speech moves you to tears, or an advertisement makes you long for something you never wanted, remember the master of words from Sicily. Remember that Gorgias understood all those centuries ago that language is a kind of magic, capable of enchanting the human soul. Remember that words can heal or wound, liberate or enslave, reveal the truth or hide it completely. He teaches us to marvel at the power of speech while remaining ever watchful of how it is used upon us. And in a world ruled more than ever by the power of words, his ancient wisdom has never felt more urgently alive. His voice reaches us still, whispering that the greatest power on earth may be a well-chosen word. And that power, he warns, is always waiting to be used on you. Gorgias of Leontinoi lived for nearly 110 astonishing years, and in that immense span, he became the greatest master of words the ancient world had ever seen, a man who believed with all his heart that language was a form of magic capable of enchanting and transforming the human soul. He dazzled the sophisticated citizens of Athens with a style of speech so hypnotic it made him rich and famous overnight. He defended the most hated woman in Greek legend simply to prove that a clever speaker could defend anything. And he wrote a work of philosophy so radical that it tried to prove nothing exists, that if it did, we could not know it, and that if we knew it, we could not share it. Above all, he understood something about the power of words that still shapes our world today, that speech can move us, persuade us, and change us in ways that have little to do with truth, and that this power can be used to enlighten or to deceive with equal ease. His great rival Plato feared this separation of persuasion from truth and battled against it, and that ancient argument between rhetoric and philosophy, between sounding right and being right, still rages in every courtroom, every election, and every advertisement in our modern age. If the strange and brilliant story of Gorgias has stirred something in you, then let it remind you that words are among the most powerful forces you will ever encounter, that the ability to understand persuasion is a kind of freedom, and that the spells cast by language can build up or tear down whole civilizations. So listen carefully to the words that wash over you each day, marvel at their beauty and beware their power, and remember the ancient magician of speech who taught humanity across all the centuries that to master words is to touch a force very much like magic itself.